People who knew someone who got unalived at work. What happened? Content warning. This video contains the recounting of sensitive events, including loss of life and some with graphic descriptions. With that said, let's hop into the first story, and it's a rather disturbing one. A worker at my construction site got flattened by a precast concrete wall after it fell from the 3rd floor. Everyone who saw it just froze in place, except one elderly worker who ran around screaming, "Don't call anybody! Did he have a helmet on?" Nobody answered him, so he got the crane worker to lift the concrete wall slightly and threw a helmet under the wall before ordering it to be lowered again. He did it to make sure the insurance would pay out the full amount to the poor guy's family. I live in Denmark, and I'm not sure how the insurance works completely in these situations, but the dead guy's own life insurance would probably cover this accident. The company has extra insurance to help their workers out, such as if you break your leg. The insurance can help you with a private hospital visit and some rehabilitation. That extra insurance can be quite strict, and that's why they made sure it looked like he had a helmet on. But either way, the guy died instantly. No helmet can save your life from an 8 to 9 metric ton concrete wall falling from 12 meters above your head. A student. He was chewing on a pen cap while walking in the hallway. Ended up choking and died. When I was 2, I was chewing on a Bic pen and the little cap end popped out and I aspirated it. It went into one of my bronchial tubes and started acting as a one-way valve that allowed me to inhale but not exhale from that lung. It wasn't immediately clear to my parents what was wrong, and the doctors at the little country hospital couldn't figure it out either. I would act fine and then suddenly start to turn blue and look panicked. By the time they got me to the larger hospital and figured out what was going on, my lung was so hyperinflated that I could have died. But I didn't. Dude was hanging out in the break room, cracking jokes, laughed, fell over, and was dead. Brain aneurysm. It's terrifying how fragile our lives are and how quickly it can end without warning. Might be a blessing as well, though. My first wife died of a ruptured brain aneurysm while teaching at an elementary school. She was in perfect health otherwise, and it was the last day of school. I was literally at home lighting tiki torches for a party that she was throwing at our house for her fellow teachers when I got the call that she was dizzy. I got to the school in time to hold her, and as I spoke to her, her pupils popped all the way open. When they dilated, she clenched her teeth together and took 3 breaths and was gone. The school's library is now named in her honor. I was locking up at the end of the day and saw brake lights flashing on the car of our welder while I was pulling out. I pulled back in to see if everything was okay. Dude was in the midst of a heart attack. Ambulance was there in 3 minutes, but I watched him fade away in my arms before they arrived. He was a good man, and is sorely missed. In 2000, I was working with a road crew doing debris cleanup on the roadsides after a huge ice storm. Me and one of my coworkers had a system running that he would be on the roadside cutting and loading the trailer, and I would unload back at the burn pit. We'd meet halfway on the road, pull over, and swap vehicles to keep pace going. We'd been running hard, and were super excited about how many loads we were getting done, 'cause that was going to give us a big payday coming. We'd been running that system all day with not a blip. On our second to last load, we met on the roadway, and he came over to my side to swap. We chatted for a second, and he realized he'd forgotten his smokes in the other truck, so he was going to come back across the road with me and grab them. I saw a vehicle coming. It seemed further away than it was, and it looked like he saw it too, but I guess not. I hesitated, and he turned and went to bolt across the road. He stopped for a second, then took a couple steps, and bam, he was hit by the truck, which was doing at least 50 or 60 miles an hour. Never, for as long as I live, will I ever forget seeing his body tossed up into the air over the back of the truck bed like a rag doll and slam into the ground. I will never forget that sound. Ever. He was barely more than an arm's distance from me when he was hit, and I felt the impact in my bones. I ran over and sat on the ground and pulled him into my lap, and I could see he was gone. I just started screaming and rocking him. The guy that hit him had pulled over and come running to offer aid. He was gone, though. I think he probably died on impact, and I hope so, honestly. I've been through some traumatic shit, but nothing tops that. I've got PTSD from it. I'm scared to cross roads or to allow others to do so. Even writing this now, tears are streaming, and I feel the panic setting in. I will never truly be over it. I don't know how someone could ever erase a memory like that, but I sure wish I could. I can't fathom the trauma the guy who hit him must have. He was so nice. He sat there with us, trying to comfort me until emergency services arrived. I remember at one point, he went and sat on the side of the road, put his head in his hands, and just sobbed. He came to the funeral too, and watching him hug the deceased's mom and her consoling him was so amazing. She didn't fault him at all. It was just a terrible accident. But I can imagine he felt guilty for a long time. I hope he was able to get therapy too and heal. I'm going to throw a semi-related story in here. Apparently hearing is the last sense to go as you're dying. I learned this from my first aid instructor when she told us about a time that she watched a car accident happen that sent one driver out their car's window into the ditch. She didn't talk much about the other car, so I suspect a hit and run, but she said that after calling the ambulance and doing her best to stabilize the victim while moving them as little as possible to avoid exacerbating potential spine injury, she just sat there for an hour, talking to them, waiting for emergency services to arrive to this desolate back road in the middle of nowhere. 10 years ago, there was a shooting at my college, where I also worked. There was a groundskeeper there that I saw frequently while coming to and from the on-campus office I worked in. Super friendly guy who didn't talk a whole lot, but was very warm and always had a smile for you. When the shooter arrived, he was shot in the head while starting his drive off campus, with his daughter in the front passenger seat, who was also shot and died 2 days later. His name was Carlos. That happened right in front of our office. I happened to not be at work or on campus for anything that day, and I'm grateful, as I could have easily encountered the shooter based on the location Carlos was. I still to this day can't believe it though. I work in the telecom industry, and had a guy I knew for a year or so who had been working in the industry for about 12 years. He got lax with safety, and would regularly go up ladders on utility poles without any kind of harness or safety equipment. One day, he fell from the top and landed on his back on a concrete wall and broke it. Ended up in the hospital, but died a few days later. PPE is important. Do not get lazy and think it can't happen to you. This was actually my employee. They were my go-to person, a friend, and we chatted constantly even after we transitioned to work from home. Working late one night, we were chatting on Slack while working, and he disappeared. 2 hours later, his phone texts me, and it says, "This is his fiancée. I found him on the keyboard, and he's dead. He won't be into work tomorrow. Please call me at my personal number." I'm privileged not to deal with people in shock in my profession. That was heartbreaking and sobering, and I'll miss him. I'm frankly a little more concerned about the fiancé's texts. I understand it could be a shock thing. I get that. It just seems strange to me to say, "Oh, hey, this is so-and-so's fiancé. They're dead and won't be at work tomorrow. Call me at my personal number." It just rubs me as a little f***ed up. I had a coworker that I used to go to lunch with every day. He was a little quirky, but a lot of people in tech are. Super smart guy that was amazing with radios and loved heavy metal music. One day, I get a message from a friend saying someone's been hurt in the next building over. I find out through the grapevine that someone shot themselves in their office. I had a sinking feeling that it was him. I desperately tried to ping him on our messaging platform, and when I tried to go near his office, they had closed that area off to everyone. The person in the next office over heard the gunshot and came running to find him. I was a manager, so having to get everyone in a meeting and tell them that a friend they've known for years was no longer with us was horrible. Easily the hardest conversation I've ever had to have. A buddy of mine worked for a sewage company. He went down a narrow shaft to do maintenance, and the fumes overwhelmed him, and he passed out and fell down the shaft, dying from the impact. He had a wife and a young daughter. Dude was legitimately a top 1% human, and it still hurts 15 years later. I went to a Safeway deli with a coworker. He was in his 30s, and I was in my 20s. He just dropped while walking, like a light switch went off, right on the floor. Brain aneurysm. I only knew him about 9 months, but it was shocking. Most store patrons got to him before me, people calling 911 and everything. We all knew he was dead, and the EMT just confirmed it. We weren't best buddies, but he seemed like a good dude. Definitely didn't deserve that. That was 10 years ago, so I'm about his age now. But after learning about aneurysms, something like that happening is quite rare. I actually found him. I was at work and was going to the bathroom. He was in the stall next to me, and I recognized his boots. I said, "Hey, what's up, man?" No reply. No biggie. 10 minutes later, I finished, and I see he hasn't moved, but his phone is on the floor, and his arm is just hanging. I call out to him. Nothing. I look over the wall and see him slumped. I scream for someone to call 911, and we break the stall door to get him out. We try to perform CPR on him. Ambulance arrives. They take over with defibrillators, but it was too late. Cause of death? Massive heart attack. A shame, too. He was only 51 years old, and a great guy. We had a mainframe operator who worked weekends exclusively. One weekend, payroll had not received their reports. The payroll manager called into the operations room and got no answer. So she called the lead operator. He tried to check the cameras in the room, but they were all turned in non-normal positions and locked from turning via the remote software, so he couldn't see anything. He drove to the office, and when he got there, he found the small windows on the big steel doors papered over. He opened the door and found the operator, hung from an attic truss. He was completely naked. His clothes were folded neatly on the floor next to him, and there was a laptop on a wheeled cart in front of his body. He was getting himself off, and I guess just misjudged his tolerance, passed out, and then never woke up. There's been some shocking stuff that's happened on our campus. Affairs, verbal and physical altercations, etc., but nothing has topped this in the 22 years that I've been there. My dad had a heart attack in the parking lot of his work. His coworkers came to the memorial in shifts because someone had to be on shift at the store since they didn't close. One of our managers got fired after HR's kid made up some lies about him. He went out to the parking lot and unalived himself right there in his car. His managers were told several times that he shouldn't be on a ladder at work because he was older and starting to lose balance. They didn't really care though, so they kept putting him in a role where he had to use the ladder in order to work. One day he slipped and brained himself on the concrete. But hey, they dedicated a bench outside to him. Assuming he was forced to do the ladder work and it wasn't the job that he most wanted to do, I sure hope that there was some firings that day, and some decent damages payouts to this guy's family. I used to work in a supermarket chain that would get fresh bread delivered every morning by a separate company. Every day, no matter what, our delivery guy would show up. 7 days a week. He never took a day off. He was the happiest, hardest working guy you could ever meet. The type of person you simply can't be upset around. He worked so hard for all of his kids' futures. I used to tell him that he's more than earned some time off, even just for a few days to spend time with his kids. He would politely smile and say, "Everything is an investment. I'm doing this now so that I don't have to in the future." Then give me a big smile and head off to his next delivery. One morning, he didn't show up. We were all so confused. He had never missed a day in years. We found out he passed away at 32 of a heart attack, almost certainly from how hard he worked. I've taken numerous lessons away from him, to never take life for granted, the importance of work-life balance, etc. The whole situation broke my heart. He never got to see his kids enjoy the money he had worked so hard for. Rest in peace, dude. The company I was working for sent a few of us to an industry conference. Our first night there, we all had a few drinks at the bar before heading off to our rooms, agreeing to meet before breakfast. One of my coworkers was a no-show the next morning. We didn't think much of it at first, but about halfway through the day, I realized he wasn't anywhere at the conference either. Didn't get an answer on his phone, and when I called my boss back at our office, our boss wasn't able to reach him either. Eventually, my boss called his wife, who had apparently also been trying to call him because he'd failed to call her that morning. She said he never missed calling her when he was traveling. We went to the hotel desk, and they sent a manager up to do a welfare check. They found him dead in the bathroom. He'd apparently fallen while getting out of the shower, banged his head on the counter, and broke his neck. We were later told that his death was almost instantaneous. That was 20 years ago, and I still feel like garbage when I think about it. We were kidding around and making jokes about him sleeping in or being hungover as we ate breakfast in the hotel restaurant, while he was lying dead in the bathroom 4 floors above us. This wasn't at work, but I worked for CNET when James Kim died while on holiday. He was returning home with his family from Thanksgiving and got caught in a snowstorm. The map he was using led him down a very remote road where his car was stranded. After a few days of holding out, James went out on his own in search for help. He didn't make it, but his family was eventually rescued. The annual holiday party was appropriately canceled, and the mood in the office was pretty somber in the weeks to follow. I heard the rescue helicopter found his footprints in the snow and followed them back to his family still stranded in the car. They also said that he walked miles in deep snow with light clothing on to find help, but the closest town was more than 20 miles away. Not sure if this is true, but he sounds like a hero that loved his family more than anything. I hope his family's doing well. I was working on a city security contract, cheap observe and report mall cop type stuff. My shift was ending, and I was headed back to the city office when I noticed something rather strange. A sleeping bag in the middle of the alleyway. I didn't think anything of it, so I went inside. Garbage truck came through while I was in the building, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together until I walked back outside and smelled it. The garbage truck ran the sleeping bag over, with the person inside. Former teacher turned drug addict from what I read later. We were apprentices at the time. I got a call for a job, and I turned it down. My best friend in the apprenticeship got the call next and accepted the job. It was a hot summer day, and he worked himself into heat stroke because he had made a few mistakes days prior, gotten chewed out, and was trying to make up for it. In his confusion from the heat stroke, he wandered into a place of the job that he shouldn't have been, passed out, and his head got backed over by a dump truck. He was the 3rd man to not come back from that job. He was married and in his early 30s. I miss him. And I'm gonna guess that every time it was written off as an occupational hazard, with the corporation probably giving their people a quick little talk about workplace safety and providing nothing to help support that. You know, things like water bottles, long-brimmed hard hats, maybe some of those high-vis neck drapes that attach to said hard hats. Like this one from Granger Industrial Supply, which is a pretty well-known corporation in Canada, selling these neck drapes for $11.40 Canadian, which, by the way, equates to $8.32 US. If you can afford to lose 2 guys to a job and keep sending more, you can afford a few pieces of safety equipment that might save lives. Now we jump into the rapid fire segment of the video. It's a little shorter, and I'm not going to say these stories are too good to leave out because that just doesn't feel right for a video about this topic. But they are solid stories, so let's jump in. My husband had a hemorrhagic stroke while we were at work. I clocked in a wife and clocked out a widow. Used to work at Amazon. There was someone who got their hair caught in a conveyor belt and was scalped. Eating a Wiener Schnitzel when a guy came crashing through the glass ceiling having jumped from the window above. My workplace dedicated a new memorial electrical box to the guy who was electrocuted to death by the old box. One of our guys fell in a recovery boiler trying to build a scaffolding to stop people from falling. It was terrible. So guys, that's it for today, and while I'm hesitant to say it, feel free to leave your story in the comments below, as I might just do a video on them in the future. With that said, I'm ReddList. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, stay safe out there, take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.